been an oldie for very long, and it has its good things. It means your wife pays a lot of attention to what your fly buttons are doing. All the wave of recognition spreads out. But also, you're actually allowed to store your memories in your wife. I heard some people in the restaurant recently, and they went like this, I think I'll have the rabbit. No dear, you don't like that. The duck looks good. Do I like the duck? No dear, no, duck keeps you winged. What do I like? And my wife and I are having to, my lady wife and I are having to accommodate ourselves into a new reality. I have Alzheimer's. Regrettably, I'm now famous for having Alzheimer's. Because I was enjoying being famous for writing all the books. But thus far, apart from a trivial effect on my typing, doesn't seem to be affecting my life too much. And in some senses, it's actually expanding it. I could have echoed everything that John said earlier, word for word, because I'll tell you folks, legal or not, I intend to end my life on the lawn of my house, with a glass of brandy in my hand, and Thomas Tallis on the iPod. Because although I am an atheist, Thomas Tallis will move anybody a little bit closer to heaven. And that is going to happen, except if wet, in the library. This is something clearly that affects us all. We have in our hands the what the Victorians often longed for, often painted, but possibly didn't get as often as they liked, which was the good death. We've learned to be very good at living in the last century. We need to learn how to die. However, not yet. My recipe at the moment, I just sent off the latest novel to the publisher, and while they go through the editing process, I wrote 3,600 words towards the next book, and now I'm working my way through my autobiography, which my publisher wants me to write. I just got to the bit where that really nasty teacher was so rude to me when I was 7 years old. I told him, the bitch is going to suffer. 55 years! Actually, I think that's possibly not quite as nasty as all that, but certainly it's kind of interesting. I do famously, just apart from having things, like quite a lot of books, and Nation is the last one out. I like fantasy books, strictly speaking fantasy books, although in many respects they do not resemble other types of fantasy books. And I write them for children and for adults, which worries people. It's like a man that went to the Wars of the Roses wearing a pink rose. No one ever quite works out and curiously enough, my ideas tend to be somewhat prescient. And several years ago now, I woke up with the image in my mind of a boy with a spear standing on a barren shore, screaming at the sky. And the beginnings of a story started to happen. And I knew the boy had just lost all his family and everybody he knew in what in those days we would tend to call a tidal wave, which had swept his island clean of all life except him, because he had been out on the ocean in his canoe. I'm very pleased I mentioned it to my friend Sarah Leffenue when I was doing a literary event a week or two later, because a month or two later the Asian tsunami happened. and I was about to start writing the book, and it was not the time for it. And so time did tick by, and other books got written, and I worked on Nation. And Nation was not so much written as extruded. I cannot think of other way. I was not aware very much of the writing process because everything fell into place. And even where I'd left a kind of gap because I wasn't certain what filled it, suddenly it more or less filled of its own accord. Never has a book written itself in such a magical way, and yet it's a children's book. And it begins, more or less, with a boy having to bury the corpses of practically everybody he knows. The effect on him, how he survives that, and what happens to the other person who arrives on his stricken island. Based on facts of this, during the Krakatoa explosion, a ship was driven, I think, 3 miles inland through a rainforest by the tidal wave, and so in Nation, such a ship is driven onto his island through the rainforest, on the wave. And it's a kind of alternate history because it contains a young woman who is white and who is the daughter of a very, very powerful man. In fact, the man who's going to become King of England. And the two of them have to reach some kind of accommodation and have to learn one another's language and have to deal with the problems that come up and have to deal with the fact that somehow the nation must be rebuilt. And they're quite young. No sex, because it's a children's book. Actually, you can put sex in a children's book, but I've never been very good at it. It's his poor wife I feel sorry for. Because there's other things. You have all the things you have to need. You have skeletons and treasure and cannibals and pirates. But underneath there is the whole argument. What do you do when your gods let you down? Why did the gods allow the island to be swamped? Why is everybody dead? They prayed to the gods. Why did not the gods help? The gods, even the little crabs escaped, even the birds escaped, but people didn't escape. The gods didn't let the people escape. People are smart. And it's not towards the end of the book that Mao realizes that people could have been smarter. By the end of the book, what the nation does treasure, among other things, it's not the gods. It's now, it becomes the first place ever to actually join the Royal Society. The whole of the survivors become members of the Royal Society, which is a kind of sneaky way of joining the British Empire without actually having to. And what they treasure now is a seismograph. And it was great fun following Mao's journey, as much through his own head and his own thoughts and fears, and the things he has to do to help the various survivors from the other islands as they come back, seeking solace on the nation. How you actually get milk for a baby when there's no woman on the island. However, the pigs have milk, but you can't milk a pig. But Mao works out how you can, which is possibly the most outrageous thing I've ever written. And people come up, but the way you milk the pig, I mean, well, you know, the baby survived. Oh yeah, it's great, but yuck. And it was just tremendous fun and sort of consumed my life. Of course, journalists come up to me now and say, it's a nation about the gods being, gods letting him down and ruining his life. This is about your Alzheimer's, isn't it? And I said, no, you haven't even done Psychology 101. I was more than halfway through the book when I was diagnosed. And I thought, the hell with it, and got on with the book.